Down in South Carolina, we're pleased to be joined by ABC's own political director and frequent co-host of this very program. It's Amy Walter joining us from Kiawah Island, South Carolina, outside of Charleston, where there's been a lot of action over the weekend. But let's start with John Huntsman. Amy, what's your sense for how Huntsman was received by Republican activists in the Palmetto State?
Yeah, no, you guys set it up perfectly. He came down, he had that very sunny disposition. When you speak to a commencement address, of course, you get to talk about things like your ideals and the big picture. And he also tried to connect with the kids these days by mentioning his stint in a rock and roll band. Remember, he played keyboards, and so he talked about the fact he had Rod Stewart-like hair and skinny jeans. But really, this gave him the opportunity to introduce himself and his family. He talked a little bit about his daughter who has diabetes and the issues that she's going through. But, you know, he met with mostly the establishment types. He came down here, met with Nikki Haley, the governor, met with some of the money folks and the state representatives, and they really did like him. It goes to the point you guys made earlier. They are desperate in Republican circles, especially donors, for a candidate they think can beat Barack Obama. Here's my question. What's going to happen when John Huntsman has to meet, like, actual voters, and they ask him questions about his record as Utah governor and some of those issues, specifically the cap and trade bill, civil unions for gay couples? That might not go over so well here.
And Amy, were there any hints this weekend of how he would address those questions and how he would talk about his record to possibly appeal to those voters, the more conservative voters in South Carolina?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, he brought with him his coterie of staff that have been sort of waging a campaign in waiting, not talking to him, they said, during this whole time he's been in Beijing, because, of course, that would violate the Hatch Act. So he had his at least 30 advisors with him at this very non-political commencement speech. But it seems like the first place he's going to have to go to is the issue of China and serving under President Barack Obama. Now, from what I heard and talking to a couple folks down here the other day, was that, you know, he did a pretty good job of answering that concern. And in fact, the fact that people are willing to sit down and talk to him despite the fact that he's been serving in China, I think suggests that he does, you know, he's found a way to at least maybe get over that hurdle. But nobody knows much about him. In fact, they don't know anything about him at all. One of our colleagues bumped into a congressman here. It was also the Republican Party convention, which notably John Huntsman was not in attendance there. But one of the congressmen at that convention was asked, you know, what do you think about Huntsman and his views on some of these social issues? What? No, didn't know so much about John Huntsman's background. So that really is going to be the question is, will he be able to win people over once they, you know, figure out what he did while he was in Utah?
And surely he'll have to get to all of that. Now, Amy, what's your sense of the sentiment that we hear from Republicans across the country, most notably now in Iowa with these folks heading out to see Chris Christie, of dissatisfaction with the field? Are they buying into what a lot of Republicans are saying, that there just aren't enough good choices out there, or are they coming to the conclusion that this is essentially the crop we're going to have with maybe some additions and subtractions, but we know who they are and we're ready to go with these horses?
I think that this feels very much like where we were in 2000 and 2004 for Democrats, right? They really wanted another Bill Clinton to carry them through, and they were waiting for that messiah to come down of somebody that looked and felt like a winning candidate. And, you know, they didn't necessarily feel good about their candidates as they were going through that cycle. And I think that that's what we're seeing here, too, that Republicans are desperate for somebody who matches up the seriousness and the executive capacities of somebody like a Mitch Daniels or a Tim Pawlenty or a Mitt Romney with the rock'em sock'em, you know, interest and rock starness that somebody like a Sarah Palin or a Mike Huckabee or even a Donald Trump can bring. They can find those two pieces and marry them. That is the perfect candidate. But as we know, you guys know all too well, the perfect candidate usually doesn't emerge, and you are going to have to go with what you got.
Amy, this is sort of a two-parter, but you're down there in South Carolina. You've been down there this weekend. You know, we hear so much about the New Hampshire and Iowa voters who are just always so plugged in, and they're paying attention, you know, 3 years before the primaries and caucuses start. What's the sense on the ground there? Are South Carolina voters starting to pay attention to this, or is it really just the uber-motivated conservative groups that are out there? But are you feeling that potentially South Carolina is going to be really gearing up for the primaries?
Yeah, I think you're right that they're not quite as plugged in, and part of it is they don't get as much attention early on as Iowa and New Hampshire. And in many ways, what goes on in Iowa and New Hampshire does impact how folks in South Carolina see the candidates. They really do look to those states to sort of set the tone. But it's clear that they don't know much about anybody in this field. And when you look at, there was a straw poll on Friday night at a Republican Party event. This was, of course, the day after the Republican kickoff debate just up the street in Greenville, South Carolina. And the person who won that, Rick Santorum. Rick Santorum also happened to be the only candidate to speak at this Republican dinner, but who came in very high, I think he came in second place, was Herman Cain, who impressed a lot of people at the debate. Who got single-digit votes, fell really so far down on the list, I don't even know if it was fifth or sixth place. Tim Pawlenty, who has made a very serious bid here in South Carolina, even wore an orange tie to the debate, talked a lot about, of course, players of Clemson, and talked about an issue near and dear to the hearts of Nikki Haley, the governor here, which is a labor relations issue involving Boeing. So he's done everything that a candidate would ask for, and still not getting a lot of love.
That's just one of the fun things about being down there this early. Amy Walter joining us from Kiowa Island, South Carolina. Bring back some good souvenirs for us, if not some
Absolutely,
good barbecue. Really
Madras.
appreciate it.